Welcome to the Succeed Against the Odds podcast. My name is Francesca Anastasi, also known as Sabea. I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I'm your host and mentor. And each week we bring you an inspiring person, an expert, or message, and some behind the scenes to help you ignite and unleash your potential. Thanks so much for listening. Welcome to another episode of the Succeed Against the Odds show. Today as my guest, I have Beth Campbell. Beth, welcome.
Thank you.
I was looking at some of your background, and I always love talking to people who are into the personal development and giving people support in living their best lives. Can you please share with our audience what it is that you do?
Well, I basically help people to connect to themselves, really understand who they are so they can understand what their true needs are and move forward into a life that they really want instead of being stuck in the routine of every day and not really doing what they want.
And how'd you get to, what got you to do what you do?
Basically, for 57 years, I was invisible. I was in the background. I wasn't seen. There's many examples that I have of where people actually said they didn't see me when they should have. And most of my life, I basically was the person everyone wanted me to be, not myself. And in 2014, on January 2nd, my 32-year-old son died. Shortly after that, I lost my longtime job. I worked with 700 people, and so that was quite devastating. And then my youngest child graduated from high school. I'd had a school-age child in my house for 34 years, and suddenly all the activities that I was involved with, volunteering at the school and running some of their events and my work, just suddenly ended. And as I sat at home thinking about what was next in my life, I realized that I couldn't continue living like that. I needed to be myself. And so I decided to go back to school and train to be a life coach. And I trained to be a life coach, counselor, and career development practitioner. And I got my instructor diploma as well. And really understanding who I was deep down, what my values were, what my temperament was, what my strengths were, and what I wanted to do with my life was so important for me to really understand what my needs were and stop focusing on what everyone else's needs were. It's been 3 years, almost 4 years, and I mean, it's been just a very eye-opening and heartwarming experience to do this. And I help other people find their voice and really understand who they are. I think if you don't know who you are, it's hard to know what it is you actually need.
Wow, Beth, you've touched on so many points. Well, first of all, I do, want to express my sympathy for the loss of your son. That in itself is absolutely devastating. I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like. So my heart goes out to you for that, and kudos to you for not letting it beat you, because look at you now. You're, after many years, helping other people. But you said so many things here where, if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of touch on those.
Sure.
And you said all these, like you basically spent, what did you say,
57 years.
34 years of your
yes.
years. You had a school-age child, so
yes.
You're constantly giving, putting all your focus on your children and everybody else. And like you said, then once they leave the nest, then what do you do now? Because everything you focused on was on other people, but not you. And you talked about being invisible. Now, what would you say made you invisible? What was it that made you invisible? Was it because you held back from connecting with people? Like, can you go a little deeper on what being invisible really mean?
I believe that when I was in vitro, I learned that my brother needed more attention than me. And when I was born, my parents would brag about how quiet I was and how, I never made any fuss. And in fact, my brother was a voracious eater and I hardly ate anything. And, these were things that were talked about throughout my childhood. And I think I just really somehow subconsciously, I felt that I needed to just be quiet. And as I grew older, when I became an adult, there were many instances that I would be invisible. I was 8 months pregnant with my first son, and I was at the deli counter waiting to be served, and people kept coming in and getting served, and I wasn't being served. And finally, I asked the person behind the counter why they weren't serving me, and they said they didn't see me. And it's like, how could you not see me? And I have other examples of this over the years. And like, I think that, you know, I made myself invisible somehow. It's like when we believe something in our mind, we create evidence to support that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know. That's the only way that I really have come to explain it. And, my family never wanted me to be invisible. I just think that I took that on somehow.
I think a lot of us have done that in one way or another, not necessarily in invisibility, but we've picked up on a comment or on a certain behavior around us where we've taken it personally and we've taken it to the extreme.
Exactly.
Right? So it's not necessarily what other people did or say. It's
just how we perceive it.
Right. Our interpretation of it, right?
Yeah, the meaning that we put on it.
Right, exactly. So I'm guessing, I can only go by guessing that, the reason you may have been invisible is maybe even your body language. You kind of probably just stayed small, like you kind of shrunk rather than really taking your space, right? Being super quiet. People couldn't even hear you breathe properly.
Well, right? Actually, I barely was breathing. Like when I went back to school, some of the training was meditation and that, and I'd always been a mouth breather. And, I started deep breathing and meditation, and I realized, like, I don't mouth breathe now. I can actually breathe through my nose. I thought it was a medical thing that I was a mouth breather. And I realized that I was hardly breathing. I had such a shallow breath. And so I'm sure that I was just shrinking in front of people. Now I kind of laugh at it because it's like, it's not like I was a dumb person, but
no,
it's obviously it was a life lesson that I was meant to learn. And
so what changed, Beth? What changed? What was the actual trigger? Was it because your youngest son left, and now?
Well, it was because he was my champion. Like, he was my child that was always encouraging me to speak up and be bigger, and he would brag about me to his friends about things that I did and whatever. Like, he was always that champion for me. And when he died, like, I actually, one day I was sitting at the kitchen table and I have prisms hanging in my window. The sun was shining in and the prisms were dancing around the kitchen. And as I looked over to the sink, I saw the image of my son standing by the sink. And I heard him say, "Mom, wake up. This is it. Like, stop this," and I just it was probably in my imagination. I don't know, but it was just that wake up call to me that enough was enough. And really, I believe it was my son's gift to me.
Would you do now differently that if you don't feel invisible anymore? I am guessing. You're not invisible.
Well, I don't, like I've been speaking quite a bit at different things, and I try to be really transparent with people. Whereas in the past, I would keep things to myself so as to not upset them or whatever. And, now I really work at being open and not keeping things quiet. I've joined quite a few organizations and I'm doing networking and things with people that I can really, they don't know me from the past, so I can be that person that I want to be, and I don't have to really fear that it won't be accepted. Like my family has had a bit of a difficult time with me speaking out and taking time for myself. So it's a work in process. It's not something that just changes overnight. And, I have to be very conscious about not shrinking. And I can't say that I'm always successful in that, but more than not, I am. And I've learned lots of tools at school and speaking out. And I belong to Story Academy, where we write 12 different stories about ourselves and speak it and videotape it, and that's quite helpful.
So you said your family is not always comfortable with you being now more out there and being outspoken. Is it because they're not comfortable about what you're sharing, or because they're not used to seeing a different you?
I think they're not used to seeing a different me.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
It's not that what I'm saying is offensive. It's just they're used to me just being quiet and doing everything.
Well, good for you for not letting their being uncomfortable with it stop you. So I'm glad that you're still doing what you want, you're doing, right? It's like, no, you're done being invisible. So, Beth, what would you say to someone who may be listening right now and totally identifies with, with your story, saying, they feel invisible, they feel nobody notices them? What would you suggest they could do right now to change that around, whether it's something the way they think or something they can do? What tips can you give them?
Well, clearly it's a lot about how you feel and what you think. I tell people it's really important to remember that what you focus on expands. So if you're focusing on being quiet and being invisible, that's just going to increase. So you need to really change your focus. And I would suggest to people that listening to podcasts or motivating speakers or reading books and just really practicing stepping out there. So finding somebody that can be your champion, that really can accept you being bolder. And, for a lot of people, this wouldn't be such an easy thing. They might need to invest in hiring a coach or joining a group that works on things like this. But I take my clients through a 5-step process. And the first step is identifying who you are. So really understanding who you are, what your values are, what are your interests. I have something I call the vitals. And it's all about really knowing what are those things that are important to me, and is my life in alignment with those things. The things that are the most important to me are the things that I do in my life syncing up with that, because I find that when we're not living in alignment with who we truly are, that's when our life is full of anxiety and anguish and depression and all these other things, because we're not really valuing what we need. There's a lot of motivational speakers, and I think getting up in the morning and listening to a motivational podcast or something really can set you up for a good day.
So starting with positive input.
Yes.
Right off the bat.
Yeah.
Great
yeah, and
advice.
really focusing on maybe times in your life where you were a little bit bolder, or things that you did where you were really shone, and celebrating those things.
So who would you say are your clients mostly? Or do you find that they're mostly women? What age range do you find? Like who is it that you
Really
prefer to work with?
kind of all over the map. I find that I work with a fair number of women, but I also work with a fair number of men. And a lot of the men are younger in their 30s, which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
But then I also work with men that are 55 to 65 that, have worked all their lives and are facing retirement and really have no idea of what's next.
That is a challenging time for most people because they put so much identity to their
Yeah.
job. And once that's gone, it's like you said, yeah, now what? Well, who am I? So there's that questioning of self,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know, like,
often you ask people, who they are, what they do, and they tell you about their job, the activities. They don't tell you about who they are.
yeah, because they think that their job is who they are, but
That's right.
that it's not who they are, it's what they do, right? That's the
It's a
difference.
really scary place, and a lot of people don't have I don't know what it is. They just don't know how to reinvent themselves. And lucky for me, I love change and I have been able to do that. But some people really need someone to walk with them while they figure that out.
So what would you say to someone who may be, so let's just say maybe some of our audience members are not feeling that way right now. They're happy, they have a career or they have a business and they're like, "Oh, that's not me, that's not me." But one day that may be them where, everything changes and activities disappear for whatever reason. What would you say would be the best way to prepare yourself now for the moment where, you know, life may change and you will be asking yourself, what now? What's next?
Well, I think it's very important to not wait until it happens. It's really something that people should be thinking about, well, all the time, but at least I would say 10 years before such an event would happen, maybe 5. But really getting activities and things in your life that you can continue to do after. So changing your focus from, the family and the job and everything, and adding in some more personal things that maybe hobbies or activities that you like to do, so that when you do retire or you do become an empty nester, you already know things that you like to do. You're not trying to figure it out all at once. You've already tested the waters, so to speak, of different activities. I find that some people think, oh, I'm going to retire and I'm going to play golf and I'm going to travel. And then they retire and they realize, well, I don't really like to travel and I don't like to play golf.
Hmm.
It's just kind of really figuring it out. What are the things that you really like to do? I mean, there's so many things out there for people and everybody is different. And so really understanding, who you are, what your interests are, and, even what's your life mission? Like, what are the things that you want to be remembered for when you leave? Those are all things that are important to think about on an ongoing basis. If that makes sense.
Yes, totally. And yeah, one of the things that I find that sometimes, I talk to people and some clients and they go, I don't know what I like, especially when I get out new people that want to start a business and they have no idea what they want to do. They have this idea like, I want to start a business, but I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And, on the basis of that, with what I personally do is, if you don't have the passion for it, don't even consider it. And if you don't know what you're passionate about, then just get out there, start volunteering in a million different directions, and you'll find it.
Yes.
Just start
Yeah.
helping other people, and it will hit you. You'll know what you're going to be passionate about. It's going to find you.
I'm a big fan of the Myers-Briggs temperament assessment. I've
Hmm.
been using it for about 25 years. I used to use it at work with my coworkers. And I find that it's a good starting point for people to get a bit of understanding of where they're at. Sometimes people need a little bit of help, such as an assessment or
Hmm.
something to get them started.
Yeah, and understand what their strengths are, right?
Yes. And, are you a big picture person, or are you detail oriented? Do you need structure and routine, or do you like to go with the flow? Like, these are all really key things to understanding what's going to work for you in your life. Yeah. So, there's lots of different ways people can change how they think, but it's really important to understand which way is best for you. There's no one shoe fits all.
Right. It's not cookie cutter.
No.
No. Well, Beth, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your insights, sharing your experience. It's so inspiring to see, the struggles you've gone through with, feeling invisible, living as an invisible person, and now just getting out there. Thank you so much for sharing some of those tips. They're very valuable. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way that they can get in contact with you?
Well, my business is called Kickstart Coaching and Wellness, or they could connect with me on Facebook, just under Beth Campbell.
Perfect. We'll have the links in the show notes so people
Great.
can reach you directly. Thank you so much.
Well, it was great talking with you, Francesca.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on, and it would mean so much to me if you would leave an honest review on iTunes. I'd really appreciate it. Till next time, embrace your magnificence.